Here are your headlines for Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, for what I call Earth One, where we live in reality, and this is my editorial selection. These are the stories I think are important to you, your family, your country, your planet, your soul, and the rest. Let's get it started. I think the big story yesterday has to be Dr. Anthony Fauci, the former government scientist and either villain or hero, depending on who you are, celebrated or despised for his work on COVID, and of course on AIDS and Ebola and so many other things, mostly celebrated. He was there on Capitol Hill yesterday, forcefully denying Republican allegations that he had helped fund research that sparked the pandemic, or had covered up the possibility that it originated in a laboratory, calling the accusations absolutely false and simply preposterous. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll have a whole bunch of clips for you coming up. Let's move on to the big news from the White House. Yesterday, President Biden announced, and we are expected today, he will sign an executive order, very controversial, allowing him to temporarily seal the U.S. border with Mexico to migrants when crossings surge. So the move, which is all but certain to be challenged, of course, in court, would represent the single most restrictive border policy ever instituted by this president or any Democrat. The order would allow border officials to turn away migrants who claim asylum once border crossings exceed a certain threshold, restricting what has long been the surest way for migrants to stay in the United States. White House officials have discussed setting the cutoff at 2,500 illegal crossings per day. If that level is set, the border would immediately be closed because roughly 3,500 migrants are currently apprehended each day. And guess what? It's not going to go well for President Biden, and he's already being criticized by Democrats, progressives, and pro-immigration types across the country. We'll see what happens. It's supposed to get signed today, and is it going to improve his lot with Republicans or people who are really very concerned about immigration and border security? No, of course it's not. They're going to say he didn't do it, or they'll take credit for it. Yeah, you know it's true. And now to two key arguments in yesterday's news as to how you know that President Biden and Democrats are not using the Justice Department or lawfare, as they say, to attack or prosecute their political opponents. Number one, the president's son went on trial yesterday. That's right, Hunter Biden's trial on federal gun charges started yesterday. A jury had been seated on felony gun charges in Wilmington, Delaware. Hard to find a jury that doesn't know the Bidens in that tiny state, where the man who's on trial, Hunter Biden's dad's picture, is in the lobby of the court. The first time in American history that the child of the sitting president is on trial, and the historic case could impact President Joe Biden's re-election campaign. Of course, First Lady Jill Biden, celebrating her 73rd birthday, was in attendance on Monday. Of course, it's not her biological son. Whether you knew that or not, I don't know. The indictment was brought by the special counsel who was appointed last year to oversee Hunter Biden probes. The president's son is accused of illegally purchasing and possessing a gun while abusing or being addicted to drugs, something I guarantee Republicans don't want a law against, by the way. Anybody can have guns, no matter how many drugs you've used or your addiction problems are, but it is a violation of federal law. Hunter Biden has pleaded not guilty to the three charges, though he's been open about his struggles with alcohol and crack cocaine addiction. And the other case that, you know, Democrats and President Biden are not using the Department of Justice to prosecute their enemies. Well, Bob Menendez, he's a Senate Democrat and has been for a long time. He's also been indicted and is on trial, and yesterday announced he's going to run for re-election, not as a Democrat, as an independent. But that's pretty audacious and arrogant. He is in his fourth week of a federal bribery trial, filed paperwork yesterday for re-election. His trial is likely, by the way, to last for another month. He has until the middle of August to withdraw from the November 5th election, but I don't know what he's going to do. I guess he's got some gold bars in the way he can rely on, or did they take them from him? Moving on, another story. The feds did indict a far-right media executive in a massive money laundering scam. The guy's name is Bill Guan. He's the chief financial officer of the far-right Epoch Times. I don't know how it's pronounced, and I hate that outlet, of course. I think it's influenced heavily by China and funded by it, right? But a lot of people buy and believe it. Anyway, Bill Guan was indicted Monday on charges of allegedly participating in a massive money laundering scheme. The Southern District of New York released a statement saying Bill Guan, 61 of Secaucus, New Jersey, charged with one count of conspiring to commit money laundering, which carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, two counts of bank fraud, each of which carry a maximum of 30 years in prison. And so that's what you got there. And moving on to another villain, lawyers for the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook Elementary School filed an emergency motion in U.S. bankruptcy court in Houston to liquidate Alex Jones Media Company. I'm going to be following that one very closely. Sad news out of Israel, where the IDF has confirmed that 4 hostages taken October 7th have been confirmed dead. A paramedic who was killed after he left his home to save lives, and 3 others, the families of the hostages, were informed that they are no longer alive and that Hamas has their remains, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. The deaths were announced as the Israeli ceasefire proposal backed by President Joe Biden was being challenged by right-wing ministers in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, who's opposed to any deal, of course, with Hamas. The IDF said its decision to pronounce the 4 hostages dead was based on intelligence. We estimate that the 4 of them were killed together in the Khan Yunis area several months ago while being held by Hamas terrorists. Some 125 Israeli hostages remain in captivity nearly 8 months after they were abducted in a deadly surprise attack by Hamas that sparked the ongoing war in Gaza. Next story, new reporting on Russia's attempt attempt to discredit the 2024 Olympic Games, according to a new report from Microsoft's Threat Intelligence Unit. Russia is banned from the 2024 Olympics over the war in Ukraine, and this reporting says they've mounted a secret influencing campaign to seek to discredit the games and sow fears of terrorism. So that was probably expected, but now we have some reporting on it. Thought this was an interesting new state law to mention in the headlines. A new law in Vermont, the first of its kind in the United States. We love Vermont. We love Vermont. Will require fossil fuel companies to pay for a share of the costs of weather disasters fueled by climate change. The Republican governor there, Phil Scott, allowed the bill to become law last week without his signature after it passed the state legislature with support of a supermajority of Democrats. And I wanted to mention that one to you. Best wishes for a speedy recovery to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Democrat of Texas. She announced Sunday that she's been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and is undergoing treatment. She said it's likely she will be occasionally absent from Congress, but assured her district, which comes as part of Houston, that her office will continue to deliver vital constituent services that you deserve and expect. Those are your headlines for Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. I cannot do them without your support. Please sign up on Patreon to support me. Listen to the podcast as well if you're watching on YouTube or TikTok. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick.